This bill has a real chance. This is an example of Washington working. If you would have watched the 8 of us in those lengthy, long, and sometimes contentious meetings in that little room, and everyone meeting in the middle.
Well, that was Senator Chuck Schumer expressing optimism on the Gang of Eight's immigration proposal. All 8 senators will appear together to roll out the bill in just a few hours. They had delayed it a couple of days in the wake of the Boston bombing. Let's bring in the Thursday gaggle, my NBC colleague at the White House, Kristen Welker, Time Magazine's Michael Crowley, and Roll Call's Shira Toeplitz. Michael, the interesting thing about watching immigration opponents this morning is that you can see that they feel emboldened by the gun defeat. Yeah. As if to say, okay, there was bipartisan leadership involved in the gun debate. There is here, but they can still defeat this. What's different?
I'm not sure that it is all that different. I guess a key point would be that I think, unlike the gun debate, the leadership of the Republican Party is invested in this. I think when it came to gun control, top figures in the Republican Party kind of felt like, we don't need to do this. They might have had some mixed feelings. I think with immigration, they felt like, for demographic reasons, for the future of our party, we've really got to get something done. So that's an important difference. But very similar is the fact you have a dysfunctional Congress, and you have a base with extreme intensity of preference. So there's sort of broad support for it, but there's intense opposition, and that is always a very strong thing in Washington.
You know, Kristen, in the White House, they don't want it to spill over. They knew guns was an uphill battle.
Absolutely.
They just didn't know when they just didn't think they'd lose so quickly.
They didn't think they would lose so quickly, but moving forward, they don't want it to get in the way of immigration. And I think when you talk to people at the White House who've been working on this, when you talk to people on the Hill, they believe that they're optimistic about this because the politics are different and because they think that there's a strong coalition of people who are supporting this. Faith groups, unions, labor groups. Grover Norquist is going to be at the rollout today. There are going to be 12 different groups, so I think that that is what they see as being really a key difference.
You know, Shira, the question is Washington, you know, it used to be, okay, you could lose some, win some, and Washington could juggle. The question now is, can Washington juggle? Does it, or is there is the intense focus on one issue? So it was on guns, and we saw what happened. Interest groups can prevail on that. Does that happen with immigration?
I think Washington can still juggle, but we're talking about 3 issues right now, essentially over the first quarter of this year: guns, immigration, and the economy. I think Congress can only handle maybe 1 or 2 issues, if that. And as we saw right now, they dropped the ball on guns. One of them didn't go through.
What is the fallout on guns? What happens? The president he seemed to telegraph how he planned on campaigning on this, use this issue in a campaign mode. The question I wonder is, in a year, is it still the same message?
Well, Chuck, this goes back to the point I just made about immigration, that the opponents here have intensity and persistence. The supporters of gun control, they may feel strongly about it right now. There may be a certain intensity, but historically what has happened is that support...
It fades.
It fades, whereas the opposition remains intense. It's called preference intensity. It's a really important thing that drives what happens in Washington. I think that, you know, one reason that some people who did not want to support gun control opposed it was that this kind of general cultural sense. It's a signifier for where you are on cultural issues. Where do you come down on certain... I think for the president, he'll try to spin it the same way, which is to say, to portray a Republican Party that is out of touch with mainstream America. It falls in with some of these other issues like gay rights and immigration, that the GOP is out of touch with changing trends.
It was interesting to see him try to take the 90%. And you know, I've got a lot of ways that the polling figure is basically off base, but he wanted to take the 90% on background check support, which does have general support, but the intensity matters there, and say, hey, 90% of Democrats are for this, 90% of Republicans weren't. He was framing the argument in political terms that he hadn't done before yesterday.
That's absolutely right. What was also interesting about what the president said, he said, this is round 1. And I've been speaking to officials, and I said, well, what does round 2 look like? And they say that's still being discussed. They really don't know what the path forward is. And, of course, if you talk to people on the Hill, they don't have an appetite for a path forward at this point in time because of immigration.
Right. I mean, sure. And that, Joe Manchin used that as one of his excuses yesterday, that he lost a few Republicans who said, hey, I'm already going to go against my base on immigration. I'm willing to do that on immigration because I think it's good long-term for the political party. they don't see that same long-term benefit in guns.
Right, and I think the long-term benefit is indeed really long-term. I would say even not this Congress, but the next Congress. Because if you look at the 2016 elections in the Senate, it's the flip of the 2014 cycle. You have a lot of Republicans up in blue states, like Pat Toomey, for example, Ron Johnson, Kelly Ayotte. These guys, there might be even a better chance closer to those elections than there would be in this.
Yeah, how much was 2014 versus 2016? I mean, it was a big difference. Yeah, it was. All right, I got to leave it there. It's been a very busy day. Michael Call Shira Toeplitz. Kristen, we've got a lot of work to do.
Indeed.
That's it for this edition. Keep watching for the latest. We'll have more from Texas on the explosion, more on the Boston investigation. The Interfaith Service is set to start in 1 hour. We will have that live here. And we just learned the president will be meeting with families of those who were injured or killed in those Boston Marathon bombings. That will happen probably after the service. He'll also meet with those first responders who were there on the scene running toward those bombs and trying to rescue people. Anyway, stay with us all day. Coming up next, Chris Jansing.